So I'm going to go ahead and let her do that. Right on. Okay. Awesome. So again, I'm Caleb. I am with Nazarenes for Creation Care along with Michaela here. And we're also here tonight with Leah Augustine, who I'll introduce more in a second. And we're going to be talking about community gardening and the local church. And so very excited about that. Again, we're going to have this resource available at nazarenesforcreationcare.com. So a little bit about my background as well. I co-pastor in Nashville with my wife at Kaleo Nashville Church of the Nazarene. Community gardened for many years. I'm a writer, work a lot with Creation Care. But what we want to do here in this time with you guys, without taking up too much of your time, but we want to share, Leah and I want to share about our stories and about community gardening ventures, and leave some room for questions for everyone. I think it's important to briefly consider the why, and consider why gardening here in connection with the local church. And I think too often Christianity has been associated sometimes with not caring for nature, and even sometimes as those who most propagate the domination of it. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can change that narrative, right? Often when you even look at our church buildings and our facilities, there can be a lack of natural beauty and intentionality around those spaces. Sometimes as if those spaces are set aside only for people, right? But not also to be good news for the rest of creation. And so when we talk about the importance of community gardening, we're not just reflecting the need to love our community with food and love our community by teaching them how to reconnect with the soil, right? All those are amazing things. But I think it's also important to say that we're saying something about who we believe God is, right? And what is important for the church, namely that we're also here to remember that creation is good for creation's sake. And remember that the first thing we're told to do in Scripture is to take care of this garden that we call home. And so it's important context for us. And so to change this narrative, the church must be about leveraging our resources in regenerative and hope-giving ways. And one of the things I find is fascinating, thinking about land and the church, that the amount of land and buildings that the church possesses worldwide is just huge. And just the Catholic Church alone worldwide owns 177 million acres of land. So second only to the Queen of England herself, right? And so you can imagine really if the Christian people mobilized around a stewardship of our land and our resources like that, it could be very huge, and is huge. And so imagine if the Christian church collectively began these initiatives to make these spaces holy ground, right? Land set apart for the reconciling work of God. And so so I don't want to take much more time here on the front end. We hope to address a lot around community garden. What is a community garden? What are the ways a community garden can operate? What might be the relationship between a local church and a community garden? Just to kind of get started. And so, but I want to introduce Leah, and she's going to jump in here. And Leah is a graduate from Trevecca Nazarene University. She's worked with the Trevecca Urban Farm for 5 years, and 4 years as an undergrad and 1 year as an AmeriCorps Vista. She operates the community garden at Inglewood Church of the Nazarene. And as the Lord leads, her passion is to see the kingdom flourish in both the earth and people. So I'm going to hand it over to Leah. I'll let you just unmute yourself, and you just tell me, and I'll click through your slides here. So.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit more of a story, like how I came into gardening and how my passion has continued to be formed in the narrative of ushering in the kingdom of God now. So you can change slide. So yeah, so my story begins with Trevecca Urban Farm, and we'll go into that a little bit and then go into how I came to Inglewood and developing the Sunnymead Community Garden again, and just a few ways on like how I've applied some of my skills that I've learned along the way. Next. All right, so Trevecca Urban Farm, we started, or I started with Trevecca as a freshman in college. I knew Jason from my high school years via Nazarene Bible quizzing, and I knew I wanted to be a farmer since I was like very young, more like 8 years old, and I didn't know what to do with that really. I did not grow up on a farm. I did not have any gardening experience, but I was surrounded by mentors and people who did garden for a living, and so I wanted to develop that passion. And so through the help of Jason, I ended up at Trevecca Urban Farm as a student worker as well as a student. Um, so basically, the whole goal of Trevecca Urban Farm is to educate future farmers and future creation care activists and environmentalists. And so on the picture on the left, far left, we're teaching high school students how to build their own garden. This is like formational in like my view of creation, as like we're the act of building a garden bed basically means put dead things on the ground, which aren't really dead, mind you, and then you plant living plants into what you think is dead, but in reality it is growing, it is thriving. And so teaching students how to do that as well, to me, encouraged the want and passion in me to also teach others how to do this. As I continued throughout my undergrad, I discovered in myself my connection with the land as I planted, and like realized that this is my vocation, this is what I'm called to do, but I didn't know in what capacity. The picture in the middle is Jason Atkins, my mentor, boss, and teacher, working with bees. I learned that at Trevecca that everything is interconnected. The earth, people, God, we're all connected to each other. And bees are a crucial part to how we live as humanity, how we live as a community, because bees are a very interesting creature. They live in colonies, they have a matriarch, but they work together as a family essentially to keep themselves alive, but also to keep the rest of the world alive through pollination. And then through all of that, we get harvests like these tomatoes on the right side. So yeah, continue. So to move on, I wanted to show you these pictures of Sunnymead and give you a little bit of background on how I got here. My senior year of college, I was approached by Chelsea Reed, who is the pastor of Inglewood Church of the Nazarene, and she asked me if I would be interested in developing the community garden again. The community garden in Sunnymead has had a rich history. I believe like several years ago, I don't remember how many years ago, but several years ago, there was a thriving community garden. And then they left and the garden died. And so Chelsea had asked me to revive it essentially. And I didn't know what that meant exactly. Being a senior in college, I was very much nervous on what to do next, if I was ready for this. But I believe that God put all the pieces together as my story has formed into what was in progress, a basic cinder block garden bed with a few little garden beds in the background, just filling it with compost and dirt and cardboard. And now on the picture on the right, you can barely see it, but we have tomatoes, we have beans, we have okra growing. The beds in the background have cucumbers and more tomatoes, basil, herbs of many kinds, and just teaching me how to nurture the soil again. And I cannot express to you how excited I get when I see earthworms. Earthworms mean life. Earthworms mean I'm doing something right. And just having, like, gardening is trial and error. I've had help along the way through connections with the community of Inglewood, community through another church that uses our building. We've helped each other in this endeavor, and I can see community developing in that. Whereas without the garden, there would be, like, I feel like there would be a gap. And so my goal with this garden is not necessarily mine. It is what I think God's vision is for this community, and that is to bring neighbors together and feed the hungry. Through a food distribution center, we give out food boxes to over 400 cars, and that can mean up to like 1,000 families. And so in this area, we are very food insecure. I would like to hope that through this garden, we're empowering our community to see that it is possible to have food grown by them and make them feel like humans. I believe in empowerment and human dignity. As we were planning out the garden, a friend of mine who is homeless at the moment wanted to plant kale seeds. It was the first seeds we planted. They were the first seeds we planted. And I was like, yes, please. She told me her story that she hopes to have a garden in her, like, at her new apartment whenever that happened. And I was like, yes, by all means, this is your garden as well. And then I come out one day and she's watching me water plants. And I'm like, do you want to water? And this is not to brag on me, but this is just an example of how gardens bring in community. When people are interested in gardening or interested in what you are doing, invite them in. This garden was meant for that. And for community gardens, it's important to have good soil, but it's even more important to know who your neighbors are and to invite them into what you're doing. Continue. So in action, for me, gardening has been a journey my whole life. Through Trevecca, Jason, and through many twists and turns, God has brought me to this place with the skills that I have. I'm ever learning more. This is a constant educational experience. Make a garden a communal space. It is meant for everyone, including 1.5-year-olds. And get to know your context. With context, it could, like with Trevecca Urban Farm, we're based in the 37210 zip code, which is labeled as a promise zone or a food insecure, health insecure area of Tennessee. There's not a safe way or an environmentally safe way to get out of the community except by car, and not many people have that. It's high um, impoverished area. And so with the Tribeca Urban Farm, our goal is to empower that community to know that they can grow their own food. They don't have to like they don't have to feel like they're cut off from fresh food. This is their farm as well. They're learning. We want to empower youth with skills that they can take with them to help their community by teaching them how to build a garden, teaching them how to rebuild bikes. I didn't mention that, but we hire youth to build bikes and plant trees. And then use what you have. So with Inglewood, I started with a shed full of tools and a dream, essentially. And then I took a year to observe the land, to observe what the weather did. And then I developed a plan. You can use whatever you have to build a bed. I use cinder blocks, and then cardboard. We have a lot of cardboard through the distribution center that we have, and so I use that to suppress weeds, and then you have to go from there. But use what you have with the resources that you have, and build out into your community. Ask for help. That's a key piece to community gardening, and it builds community as well. So that is me. If you would like more information, please email sunnymeadcg@gmail.com. I would be happy to put you on our community email list if you would like updates.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your story and your journey, Leah. I think there's so much there, and I want to hit on some of those things here in a second. But yeah, you did mention it's a journey, and it definitely is a journey, and it is very contextual. So I want to spend a couple minutes, and I want to share with you guys about the garden I helped start several years ago. So this is Woody Crest Community Garden, and our church, Kaleo Nashville, began this garden in 2010. And there in that photo, actually, this is a groundbreaking that we did. And we basically, the house, you can kind of see in the background, we had a cookout, set up a bunch of tables, invited everyone over. And then at one point, we sort of called everyone over to the garden and said, hey, we're doing this. And so kind of from the very front end, our mission was to get community involvement on the front end, is really how we started. But this was in 2010. There's multiple reasons that we wanted to start a community garden. Let me see, I think I have another beginning picture here. Okay, yeah, so this is like the first day we actually started digging. We for sure had not much idea what we were doing. So there's hope for everyone. We actually rented like a sod remover. It was just, I don't even garden that way anymore. Leah alluded to making lasagna beds, which we can talk about if you guys want, but very no-till, like best practice of gardening, I would say. But anyway, we started it how we did back then. But yeah, there's lots of reasons to start a community garden, but it really offers a third space, right? And it's great for the community. Everyone loves it. We for sure added just equity into our neighborhood with this community garden. I mean, someone owes somebody some money, but no, but we've said over the years, we've even been told by other gardeners, right, how they felt that the Woody Crest Community Garden was rare and that it was very community owned. And so, let me see if I've got some more slides. So the land, so this guy here to the right, so that was Ron. He actually passed away this last year, but at the time, there's a blue house at the end of the picture, and he lived in that house and actually leased all of this land we ended up gardening on from the railroad. And come to find out, his wife used to garden there, who had passed on, and he was like, "Hey, if y'all want to garden there, it's fine with me, you know." And we started using the land that he was leasing from the railroad to garden there. And we've never had any contact with the railroad. You know, it's like an easement, but we've always said if they come for us, we're going to the news. But I think it is important to sort of like, maybe you've got a lot of space around your church building. We don't even have a church building. And so it's very much keeping our eyes open for potential third spaces for community together, I think is important, especially in a time where we've really lost our front porches. And I think people are really hungry to find those sort of third spaces to connect with your neighbor. And so we sort of found this space, and it was kind of a name it and claim it for Jesus situation. And it's grown over the years. It's had several different iterations in the way it operates. One of the many purposes is our congregation actually met out there for many years, off and on. And we realized at the time, right, there's just like a handful of us, and we were renting space from somewhere. And we thought, you know what, we could just save this money and use it for other ministry resources if we could just, you know, buy some picnic tables and meet out in the garden for a while. And so we did that. We actually, you can see those shiny new picnic tables from many years ago. So we moved our congregation out into the community garden for a hot minute. And yes, it was cold. Yes, it was hot. Yes, it was buggy. And yes, there were cicadas for a summer. But it was great. And we ended up back and forth there over the years for many seasons, one being COVID, which it was great to sort of be back out in the garden during that season. You can see us there praying. This is Easter. I think this is Easter maybe a year or two ago. Out in the garden. See some babies that we've had over the years. Yeah, so we've really fleshed out ministry very visibly right there in the middle of our neighborhood in this community garden, and it's just been very enriching over the years. Our vision for the garden was to grow food and grow community, and honestly, the food was always secondary to the community. We always wanted, again, to provide a space where people of all ages can come, learn, engage with the soil, and find solidarity in community. But so let's see. Yeah, so a couple years in, we started hosting events at the community garden as well. And we said, you know what, every fourth Thursday, which was recycling day, we're going to host, our church was going to host a like a picnic. And so we did this, and it was pretty low turnout at first, and we sort of scratched our heads and began to realize that folks wanted to contribute again, right? Same with the gardening. Folks want to contribute. They don't want to show up empty-handed. They don't want to feel like freeloaders. And so we changed. We went from picnic to potluck, and then things really, no pun intended, blossomed from there. And we definitely leaned into this sort of potluck theology about the way we were doing our community gardening and in our gatherings, and really putting it into the hands of the neighbors themselves as much as possible. And just really rich seasons there. And we also began hosting other type of events. We did a fall festival in our community garden for many years. and it was a great time. Had all the usual stuff, right? We literally hooked up this old trailer to the back of this old our old trash hauling truck. We put hay in it, and we did hay rides around the neighborhood. There was even one year we literally had a flat tire. We just sort of drug on, and it's very sort of urban fall festival. We had a bouncy house, did the face painting. We had we did neighborhood chili cook-off. We did a pie contest. We would spray paint ladles gold and hand them out for prizes, just very grassroots, but it was really great. Let's see, some other events that we would do. We did a free sale, basically like a yard sale, except everyone contributes and everything is free. So those were always a lot of fun. Yeah, so we would do movie nights and different things, but the community garden really took shape as more and more of this place where the neighborhood centered around, the community centered around. And so as far as the gardening itself, it took many forms depending on the season. And at different times, different people managed parts of it or led it. And because our church has always been so service oriented, for years, for a really long time, one of our what we call Sunday impacts, we would actually the morning service would end, we would have lunch together, and then after lunch, folks would just go out into the garden and pull weeds, work in the garden and do whatever needed to be done that afternoon. And that also, again, served as sort of another space to connect with the community. And so there's always been sort of several different iterations of how the work got done. There's no one solution fits all, I will say, for gardening like this and operating community gardens. We've done watering rotations. We've even had the local fire department come out before to water for us in really hot seasons, and they're just sitting on their hands when there's nothing burning, so they loved it. We fed them hamburgers and all that stuff. And actually one year we operated a CSA out of our community garden for like $5 a week or something. You got this little bucket. I don't recommend it. It was a lot of work with not I don't know what the real benefit was, because there's actual good CSAs out there. But again, for our garden in particular, growing food was always more secondary to growing community. And so, but we did grow food, and I think it is important to point out that did happen. And for our context as well, that also meant a lot of food education, especially for folks who may have never seen food grow. I've seen neighbors walking through the garden and looking for something to harvest that day, not knowing anything, right? You know how if you're harvesting lettuce, you clip the leaves and take what you need, right? They would just grab the head, pull it up by its roots and walk off with it, because they just don't know. And so we realized early on that education and signage was really important. Again, right, what does it mean to sort of educate and walk alongside our neighbors in this process, and teach about healthy soil and all those sorts of things. I'm going to land the plane here in a second. So currently our garden is in a new season, and for the first time ever, I'm really barely involved. And my family, several years ago, my family moved like a mile away, so we're not in that direct community anymore. And so I've been stepping further and further out as it goes. And a few years ago, we transitioned from just a holistic garden to plots. We had never done plots before, so you can kind of get a glimpse of when we started doing plots in that photo there. But this really, I feel like, helped neighbors to have a little bit even more ownership, right? Because they knew like this was their plot, or they could steward these particular plots, and allowed us to be a little more hands off, and the neighbors a little more hands on in a different aspect. But often, because the garden was pre-picked for so many years, folks will still come through and just pick things in different people's beds. And some of the neighbors are like, whoa, and we're like, you know, what are you going to do about it? And but again, at the end of the day, in this particular garden, no one is depending on this food for necessarily their livelihood, although it is supplemental. And so today the garden is totally community operated. It's funded not by the church anymore. They've got their own Instagram. I don't even have a password to it. They send out a newsletter every month. I'm really barely involved at all. A couple other things I'll mention, and then I want to open it up for questions and dialogue. But we were always dreaming of how to use the garden in other ways as well to serve our community. One way has been glass recycling. We built this structure several years ago. It's held up, and it's a glass bottle drop off. And so in Metro Nashville, they don't pick up glass curbside, but you can pay services to do that for you. But we wanted to offer this for our community garden. And so we built this as just like a saying, hey, don't throw your glass away, because I know that's what you're doing. Bring it over to the garden, put it here, and then we'll take it off every now and then. And so now, since the neighborhood's blown up a lot more, it gets used a lot, and somebody, I don't even know who, pays for it to be picked up like every 2 weeks or something. So it's been a huge thing. We also have obviously a big compost there on site. So again, like, don't throw that food in the trash, like save it, bring it to your community garden, drop your leaves to your community garden. If you want to bring your cardboard over to the community garden, that's fine too. And so just sort of like, what other ways can we offer service to our neighborhood? And then the last thing I'll mention, which is more connected back with the church, but still with the garden, is we started a program called the Giving Tree. And basically, when someone in our neighborhood passed away, we wanted to plant a fruit tree to remember them by. And this is the very first one that we did. This was for Ron's wife, who had passed away before most of us lived in the neighborhood, and who gardened in that spot. And so you can kind of see, what the plaques looked like there. But this initiative has just been fantastic, and the community, I think, has really appreciated that. We planted, I meant to look it up. We planted several trees over the years. And if you actually go to our website, our church's website, kaleonashville.org, my wife has spent many hours, but there's like a map, like a Google map that you can click on that shows where all the fruit trees are at within like the 3 square miles of this area. And so it's just been a really, I think, great way to give back to the community, because the idea is that, you can sort of just walk the neighborhood and there's fruit and it's sort of life-giving. But let me see, I think that's, so yeah, let me just stop there. I've shared, Leah shared, you might have a question. Right. I think I definitely want to give you guys some concrete takeaways, but I would love to hear, are there questions around finance or leadership, or, we could get tangible and sort of actual, like, ways to sort of like work your soil. But let's just do this. If you guys want to just, it's kind of a small group of us, maybe you guys want to unmute yourself, or however you want to do it. Or if you want to throw in your question in the chat, let's just go that way. And Michaela, if you want to help moderate any of this, feel free to jump in. Right on. So let's jump into some questions.
Leah, who does the weeding at your garden?
Right. So currently it's me. As I'm getting to know my community, I'm sure the connections I make will make it where I can be a little more hands-off. As far as watering goes, the associate pastors of Inglewood have been very diligent in helping me water. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I imagine there's still some education that goes on as you get volunteers that want to help weed, that they
Mhm.
recognize weed versus garden plant.
Yes. So as the garden is new to this community, even though it's been around for a while, this is a new generation of people in this area. It's constantly being developed, so more people are moving in. As that, like as my connection with them grows, I anticipate having days where I educate them what's weed and what's plant.
Okay.
We have a question in the chat. It says, has your local church seen growth as a result of starting a community garden?
Yeah, I'll definitely say that it's seen growth. Well, in multiple ways. So, right, depends on how you want to read that question. But yeah, absolutely. I think the community garden for us, if we're talking about, church attendance and that sort of thing, especially because our congregation physically met there on a Sunday morning, we were just very visible, right, out there, and so that definitely did, draw folks into the space more, in the narrative in the church, and I also think that we live in a time more than ever where if you see a local church engaged in efforts like this and like caring for the earth and gardening, I think that's very attractive to a large population of people, right? Because the church has been pretty silent on some of this stuff for a long time. And so I think that I think when folks see that, their antennas are really going up. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off of that, so as I mentioned before, we have homeless neighbors that frequent our area, and one of them, who has helped me in the garden before, like as a result of her helping in the garden, she's coming in to church. She feels accepted and wanted, and so it's not like drastic growth, but I would say one person at a time. If they feel that they are loved and they are being treated as human, they'll come, I think.
Is there an opportunity to talk about the environmental benefits of growing locally?
Absolutely. As the garden continues to grow and I walk the neighborhood, I realize that there are many people in this area that believe in No Mow May, like movements like No Mow May. They want to care for creation and in the environment. As I said before, I've used recycled materials to help build this garden with things that have been just laying around the church. And whenever I talk to people in the garden, it's usually about soil health or how can we better take care of our lawns, right? For pollinators.
Yeah, that's great. Lori, I feel like you've got more there. So feel free to unmute yourself and jump in if you've got things you would like to share too. But yeah, absolutely. I don't have anything to add to Leah, but yeah.
What methods do you guys use for watering?
That's a great question. So it might be probably a different answer for Leah, but we had a watering crisis for a while. So one of our church folks lived across the street from our garden, so we ran a really long hose for a while, and then they haven't been in the house for a while, and we kind of the last couple years, folks would actually like bring water because they only the way we're doing it now is plots. They only have to water, they're only taking care of their own plot. So they were kind of bringing their own water for their plot. But folks have got creative. And then most recently, a neighbor who lives across the street from the garden, just amazing guy, and has like put up a literal like water hookup at the end of his yard with a big old sign that says water for community garden, and to just let people come get water. And so yeah, because it is sort of like the land is just out there, there's no water hookup on site.
Yeah. And for Sunnymead, right now we're using a really long watering hose that's connected to the house I live in, which is literally feet from the garden, so it's not that big of a deal. But today, as I explored one of the Nashville Food Project's community gardens, I came across a rain collector barrel that has like this saucer thing. So you don't even have to have a roof. The saucer catches the water. And so I'm like, we need 2 of those.
That's cool. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to mention is if you don't have access to water, if you use the rainwater collectors, you can do it in a barrel, you can do it in all sorts of things. And then the other thing I was going to mention was teaching people how to do drip irrigation with those rain barrels, because we waste a lot of water using our broadcast spraying methods on our lawns. And that's really not the way to efficiently water a garden or, anything where you're trying to grow plants. So maybe there's a way maybe that would be another thing you could do educationally, is teach people how to use their water more, conserve their water more efficiently.
And of course, Jonathan's trying to get a word in about conservation. Yeah, good stuff. Other questions? These could be nitty gritty questions. This could be around anything.
Do either of you have anyone that brings gray water to your gardens?
At this point, if someone does, I don't know about it, but it's quite possible.
Right now, no. But gray water specifically, I would like to learn more about how to go about collecting it.
I would say in Nashville, most water is gray water,
Yeah, including the rain.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I will put in environmental science. One of the labs we did routinely was looking at the effect of soapy water on germination and growth of plants. And it was wonderful fertilizer these days. So the use of gray water is to be supported on any legislative act that you get in California. Some of the counties have approved it and others have not. But if you have opportunity, it makes a lot of sense. If you know where your water's, if you practice what I practice, don't put anything down the drain you don't want to eat.
Words to live by.
That sounds perfect.
That's what's up, man. That's so good. I love that. I gotta write that down. Yeah. Other thoughts. I'd love to see too if anyone here wants to share about maybe a garden you're thinking about starting with your congregation, or maybe a garden that you've already got going, feel free to chime in.
About the pests. No,
Yeah,
still
there you go.
muted.
Was
Say
that a
again?
question?
What do you do about the pests? Squirrels?
Yeah.
So
Raccoons.
currently we have rabbits, and they like strawberries, and they like kale. And it's like,
Lettuce.
really, right now, the only thing I can do about rabbits is just let the house dog in the yard and let him smell them out and see what happens. Really, right now, I am kind of like, you know what? It's its first year. It's the first year we're growing anything essentially, and rabbits and squirrels are gonna come get your stuff. That's just part of it. But if we're going to live in harmony with creation, we'll suffer through the first year and let the plants multiply to where they'll be so full, at least they'll leave half of it for us.
Yeah, that's a good thought. There is, especially, so our garden is organic, and we tell everyone that when they want to get involved there. But the pests are, we've sprayed spicy things and done all the things, but it is going to happen. And you kind of just do have to roll with the punches. Honestly, the kids in our community garden, the kids are out there playing. They're worse than all the critters. You know what I'm saying? We're like, stay out of the garden, but anyway, and then you're like, well, it's kind of there for them. So yeah, and again, these are all things that at the front end, I always encourage folks to say, one, start small. Everyone, I think, in their mind's eye wants a big, robust, beautiful, elaborate community garden. But the way to get one of those is just to start with a plot, and start small. And I've seen gardens fail that try to get too big too quick, and it's really hard to get the volunteer base for that. It's really hard to sustain that, and you really have to wade into those things. Also, there has to be someone in charge, even if it's, it is community operated, but someone is in charge. Someone gets the messages, someone puts their phone number out there, someone gives the answers. And I think that's really important, is that you still, even if you have someone dealing with logistics and the other person who's like knowledgeable about the garden stuff, but someone has to own it for sure, even if it's a shared responsibility with another person or something. But those are a few little things I would definitely suggest. But yeah, pests happen. We just planted a peach tree back in the fall. It's already been half eaten by deer. I'm like back there every night reiterating the fence. But yeah, it is part of it, and they're hungry too, I suppose. So yeah, I've started overplanting actually, and then thinning out. But anyway, yeah.
And just to give kind of like a real life application to what Caleb just said, as far as like Sunnymead Community Garden goes, I am the person in charge, but there has been another person from Sozo Community Church that also meets at Inglewood, actually working toward like talking with me, what's the vision? Like she's been acting out my vision, like what do I want to see, and she'll do it. So she's been kind of like the logistics person, and I'm the visionary in this case. And then now that the vision is at a point where it can start to grow things, I am now the caretaker. That's kind of how the roles go.
That's great.
Yeah.
And honestly, we didn't even hit on like food distribution, but if there are particular questions there, we found in some seasons we were inundated with vegetables and had nowhere to take them because we hadn't done the work, And so it's important to think about the back end as well. And so in our context, that could be a partnership with the Nashville Food Project. That could be, again, you sort of like have signups to receive a little bucket. You could, it could be a ministry of the church where you're supplying vegetables. And so there's a lot of different ways to go about that, but it is important to think about the back end as well, because it does get July and August and you're like, whoa, we grew more than we thought we did. So.
And yeah, in Sunnymead's context, the food can go to anyone who passes through the garden. It will also be harvested and put into boxes that we give out in our food distribution at Inglewood, and also just for our homeless neighbors. I planted watermelons last year in a small bed, and right before I was about to pick them, someone who was homeless needed a watermelon. And so, like, it's going to happen. And you know what? It's a ministry, and that's how the kingdom of God came to him at that moment. So
there you
we
go.
celebrate that.
That's what's up. Yeah. I don't want to keep folks, but any last questions, things burning on your heart? We'd love to hear from anyone else.
Yeah, I was just going to mention my situation is a little bit unique. We have a church that has plenty of space for a garden, but we're actually in a huge farming community. So everybody already has their own gardens. So we are not looking necessarily to garden at our church, but I'm also sorry, I've got littles that are still up. I'm also part of a nonprofit that is helping women who've been trafficked. And we're going to be starting a garden on site for them to not only help be part of growing their own food and learning how to garden and to grow their own food and have that sustainability. But also we're hoping down the road to have like a farmer's market as well for the town that we're located in, because there's not a local farmer's market. And so we're hoping that's a way for the women to work and earn a little bit of that income themselves and help distribute some of that food that way as well. So we'll obviously use the food that we grow for the women on site, but then any extra we'll be selling at a farmer's market for the town as well. So that's kind of our hopes and dreams for our garden that we're working towards.
That's
Yeah,
so cool.
I love that. Thanks, Morgan. That's really good. A couple of things that made me think of, I was talking with someone at our district assembly just recently who is in a similar situation in a rural area. Everyone's kind of already got their own garden. And, and that's, another reason why, I would say in tandem, I feel like every community garden should be throwing up grills and picnic tables, and, that it's also a place that you want to gather with your community. And what does that look like? But a couple seasons ago, I was involved with a community garden share. And we weren't actually growing vegetables. Well, I was at home at the time, but what we did, we set up a table and a tent at the elementary school down the street. And what it was a place we were inviting all the neighbors to come and basically vegetable swap. Or if someone didn't have anything, because again, we've all got so much, it's July, it's a place to come get some things. So we were kind of creating that third space in the neighborhood. While it wasn't a garden, we were setting up that sort of space to come and have like a garden share. And so that's an idea as well. And then it's sort of over here, but it is important to think about, I think especially, urban and rural communities, but what does it look like to get your congregation or community more involved in your watershed, and what it looks like to steward that area and protect that area. And so those are also good things to sort of rally around. But yeah, it sounds like you guys are up to some fantastic stuff.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, like, if you're able, adding fruit trees to the agenda for those women. Planting trees is therapeutic. The act of planting trees, and it also just rebuilds and promotes your old hard growth forests and what the land ultimately wants to become. And on a plus side, in later years, as the trees produce, you'll have more of a niche when you decide to do your farmer's market as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that advice.
Yeah, anybody else? Okay, right on. Well, if there are more questions, you can always email us. Leah, do you want to throw in your email address in the chat there? I had it earlier, but I lost it. And you can always reach out to Nazarenes for Creation Care on our website or at nazarenesforcreationcare@gmail.com. So we love talking about community gardens and what it looks like for the church to engage in more of these conversations. And again, there's no one size fits all, but this is something that I feel like we all should be moving forward on, especially as we have just so much resources and land that we're just mowing it, and so when it could be maybe a little bit something more for your congregation or your community. So it is something to think about. Yeah. Well, thank you all for your time, and grace and peace to all. And I hope that everyone will come back and join us next week as we talk about conservation.
Thank you.